Okay, so we're going to look at releasing your sound. I'm going to whiz through this because I think it's probably just a refresher for some of us, or for most of us. The first sound we're going to look at is the sound that our body makes. So we're created with a voice that has the capacity to make sounds, make a joyful noise. We were hearing some of that last night. Our body was making sounds with our voices, but also other sounds, and it was phenomenally powerful. And what we were doing was we were joining in with the rhythm of heaven. And actually, when we join in with the rhythm of heaven and we connect with what heaven is doing, it just ushers heaven straight into the place. Okay? So what I want you to also bear in mind through this session is what Alice was modeling when she did her session on the releasing heaven. Okay? So because actually in administering in the Spirit and legislating in the Spirit and anything else that we do in the Spirit, we have all sorts of tools that enable us to do those things, okay? So the session that we did earlier was a tool that, it was a different type of tool to get into the Spirit. So we're kind of familiar with the tool that is worship. We're familiar with the tool that is soaking. This is yet another tool, and actually it opens up a different dimension. Okay, so they're just different tools, and depending on what you're wanting to do, you're going to, if you think of it as a toolbox, depending on the job, you're going to get the right tool. Okay, so with our body, we make a sound. Psalm 7:1, "Oh, clap your hands, all people, shout to God with a voice of joy." So it can be in prayer, it can be in worship, it can be in shouting, can be with our body, it can be intelligible, and it can be unintelligible. Okay? So Psalm 12:5 says, "Now I will arise, says the Lord, because the poor are oppressed. Because of the groans of the needy, I will set him in safety and in the salvation for which he pants." Okay, so what we need to understand is that sounds that are unintelligible to us are completely intelligible to heaven. Okay? And, in the New Testament, it talks about travailing and groaning prayer. Okay? It's another language, almost, if you think of it like a language. So we understand that tongues is a language. Well, our body produces a language that is intelligible to heaven by the sound that our body makes. And that sound, okay, so guys, here's another little news flash. That sound that our body makes is probably more the weighted ratio, if that's the right way of putting it, is probably more on the bit that you don't hear than the bit that you do hear. Okay? So the sound that our body makes is not just about the bit that you hear. And the bit that you don't hear shouts louder than the bit that you hear. Okay, so for those of us who are feeling really excited about the fact that we've managed to keep our mouth closed at the inappropriate thought process, and we're feeling really pleased with ourselves, okay, because nobody knows, okay, that all that stuff is making a sound, and it's producing a consequence. Okay, now let's just talk about the consequences that we can absolutely see. Okay? And I'm going to talk about something that we're probably all familiar with. So in the context of a community, somebody starts to grumble. So you have a community where there is harmony, somebody starts to grumble. Okay? The impact of that ripples throughout the whole community. Okay? And we can recognize that because we've seen it. Yeah? Okay. I want to say to you that it can be as detrimental to keep your mouth closed, but to grumble in your spirit. Okay? Because actually it's creating that same jarring in the spirit. Okay, so what I'm wanting us to recognize is that as we're journeying forward into the new things, into the places of authority, into the places where we are supposed to be slaying the dragons and creating food and legislating so that the law of the land comes into alignment with what we've legislated in heaven and all of that kind of stuff, okay? We need to understand that there is a consequence to our ungodly muck, and that gets in the way. Okay, so I'm just wanting to put that on the table because for all of us, it's recognizing that we have to deal with that in order to be able to move into what He's got for us. Okay, so the groans of the needy release a response from heaven. Okay.
So is that a good thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. The groans of the needy. Mm. And it's interesting. If I just want us to look at that. Let's look at what that actually means. Okay. The groans of the needy. So it's not the grumbles of the needy. It's the groans of the needy. Okay. So there's a difference between being called into a place and it's hard and grumbling about it. And actually, heaven does not respond to grumbling. Well, heaven responds to grumbling, but certainly not in any kind of way that we want to see. Okay? If you just look at the scriptures, you see what happens to grumblers. Okay. However, the groaners are recognizing that this is where God has put me, or recognizing that this is where I am. Okay, and I'm going to make the most of this. However, it is hard, and there are groans that come out of that as a result of the fact that you're pushing through in a godly manner. Do you understand? And heaven will always respond to those groans, because those are the groans of a child moving into sonship. And heaven will always respond to the call of sonship, always. Because actually, Jesus came to raise up sons. Okay. So, even we looked at that. All sounds have a purpose in heaven. Okay. All godly sounds have a purpose in heaven. All sounds have a purpose. Okay, cool. So our godly sounds will result in something being released in the earth as a result of us. So, yes, last night you could feel a landing into the room of what heaven was stirring for us. You could feel it tangibly land because we were partnering with the sounds of heaven. Okay, so you can see that when we get it right, and it's so easy to get it right, the thing is just dispense with the plan and then see what he does as a result of that, because when there's no plan, the only thing you can do is follow the drumbeat of heaven. Well, you could make it up as you go along, but even that, when your heart is positioned, you think you're making it up, but you're not, because you've already positioned your heart with him, and so you think, I'm just making this up as I go along, but it's actually him, because you've already given him control. Do you know what I mean? So actually it's really hard to get it wrong when our heart is right. So we have a sound that resonates with heaven, and we have a sound that is uniquely ours. So we are unique in so many different ways, And the sound has the capacity to release change. We already recognize that in the way that we use tone when we speak. We understand that actually, depending on what tone we use, it will release a level of something as a result of what we're saying. So we're created to resonate with the sound our body makes in heaven. Okay? So when I first started looking at this, I thought that it was to do with the sound that our spirit makes in heaven, because I was still in that thinking of my body's here and my spirit can travel and whatever. But of course, he's in us and we're in him, and the kingdom is here and it's in hand, and it's do you know what I mean? So my body is as much part of this whole process. My body resounds with the sound it makes in heaven. Psalm 98:8, let the rivers clap their hands, let the mountains sing together for joy. So clearly the rivers can't clap the way that we clap, okay? But they release a sound that is a clap in heaven and a clap on earth. Okay? So we make a sound on earth that resonates with the sound of heaven. Brokenness distorts our sound. So this is another reason why I'm so passionate for inner healing, dealing with our stuff, getting rid of the filters, because all of that stuff gets in the way. Brokenness often takes away our voice. So there will be some level of that somewhere. And what happens is that what happens is that sometimes people recognize that they don't want to recognize brokenness, but they recognize that their voice has been muted or is unheard. And so it's almost like that. What can ensue is almost like a temper tantrum of a child, because I will be heard, I will have a voice, but actually there's nothing godly about that voice. And yet when we've had our inner healing, when we've walked a significant path of our inner healing, we recognize that. And actually we don't need to have a voice anymore, because what we understand is that we have a voice in heaven, and our voice in heaven will manifest on earth. So we actually don't need to make a lot of noise here. We don't need to get attention here, because we have the attention of the Father in heaven, and when we have his ear, the rest is simple. So sometimes it makes us release ungodly sounds. Okay. Excuse me. Making a sound does not rely on having a voice. The earth groans for the sons of God to be revealed. Okay, so what I'm going to ask us to do is we're going to make a sound. Okay? It doesn't matter what that sound is. We're going to make a sound. And I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, or however you access the spirit, okay? I'm going to ask you to position yourself to see in the spirit. And then I'm going to ask you to release that sound through your whatever. But I'm looking for an audible sound in this instance. Okay, for this exercise, I'm looking for an audible sound. So you release that audible sound. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to see what happens in the spirit. Okay?
Thank